How big does a monster have to be to terrify the god of thunder? Picture the end of the world. The sky is literally crashing into the earth. The ocean is boiling away into steam. The Titans, beings the size of mountains, who have ruled the cosmos for eons, are screaming. They aren't screaming in anger, they're screaming in absolute primal terror. Why? Because the ground just opened up and something worse came out. Something so massive, so chaotic and so violent that even the gods had to look away. But to understand how we got to this moment, the moment the universe almost broke apart, we have to go back to the beginning. Back before Zeus was king. Back before the Olympians had their palaces. We have to go back to a family secret that was buried deep underground. A secret with 50 heads and 100 hands. You've probably heard of the Titans. You know Cronus, the guy who ate his kids. You know Atlas, the guy holding up the sky. You think of them as the heavy hitters of Greek mythology. But what if I told you they were the safe option? What if I told you that their parents, Gaia and Uranus, had other children first? Children so horrifying that their own father took one look at them and decided they could never be allowed to see the light of day. This isn't just a story about big monsters. This is the story of the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones. And trust me, everything you think you know about the scale of Greek mythology is about to get completely rewritten. Let's start with the biology because, honestly, it's the first thing that breaks your brain when you try to picture these guys. Their names were Briareus, Cottus, and Gyges, 3 brothers, born from the earth, Gaia, and the sky, Uranus. Now, usually when a god and a goddess have kids, you get a god. Maybe they have a weird superpower, maybe they glow a bit, but they look like people, perfect, beautiful people. Not these 3. Imagine a human torso. Now scale that up until it's taller than the highest peak of Mount Olympus. Now stack 50 heads on top of that massive shoulders. 50. Just a writhing, screaming mass of faces, all looking in different directions, all shouting over each other. And then the arms. 100 arms sprouting from those shoulders. Not like a centipede, but a dense, muscular forest of limbs. Can you imagine the coordination that takes? Can you imagine the noise? Ancient texts don't just describe them as big, they describe them as presumptuous. That's a weird word for a monster, right? Presumptuous. It implies they were overwhelming. They took up too much space. They existed in a way that felt wrong to look at. They were chaos given form. And their father, Uranus, the literal sky, hated them. Now, Uranus wasn't exactly Father of the Year material to begin with, but his reaction to the Hecatoncheires was visceral. He didn't just neglect them, he was repulsed. In some versions of the myth, he pushes them back into Gaia. Think about that for a second. He tries to shove them back into the Earth's womb because he can't stand the sight of them. In other versions, he binds them in chains and hurls them into Tartarus immediately. This is where the timeline gets interesting and where most people get the story wrong. You might think the Titans were the first rebels, but the tension that led to the first war in heaven started because of these 3 monsters. Gaia loved them. They were her children, no matter how monstrous. And having them trapped inside her or locked away in the deepest pit of the underworld caused her immense pain. That pain turned into rage. And that rage is what led her to create a sickle of adamant and give it to her youngest Titan son, Cronus. You know how that goes. Cronus takes the sickle, ambushes his dad, and takes over the universe. But here is the crucial mistake. The mistake that would haunt the cosmos for thousands of years. When Cronus took the throne, He promised his mother he would free his brothers. He promised he would release the Hecatoncheires from Tartarus. But once he was king, once he saw them, he realized his dad was right. They were too dangerous. They were too big. They were uncontrollable. So Cronus left them there. He left his own brothers rotting in the dark, and that betrayal is what set the stage for the most brutal war in mythology. Now, let's talk about Tartarus for a minute, because to understand the Hecatoncheires, you have to understand where they lived for eons. We tend to think of hell or the underworld as one place, but in Greek myth it's layered. You have the Asphodel Meadows, where regular ghosts hang out. You have Elysium for the heroes. Then you have the realm of Hades. But way, way below that, as far beneath Hades as the earth is beneath the sky, is Tartarus. It's not just a prison, it's a cosmic void. It's a damp, gloomy, storm-ridden abyss. It is surrounded by a bronze fence and wrapped in 3 layers of night. It is effectively a black hole of the divine geography. Briareus, Cottus, and Gyges sat in this darkness for thousands of years. Just sitting, waiting, growing stronger, growing angrier. Imagine the psychology of that. You have 50 heads to talk to yourself with. You have 100 hands that have nothing to hold but chains. You are the strongest beings in existence, and you are being treated like garbage by your younger, prettier siblings, the Titans. While they were rotting down there, the world above was changing. Cronus became a tyrant. He started eating his own kids, the Olympians, to prevent a prophecy that said he'd be overthrown. Zeus escapes, grows up, comes back, makes Cronus barf up his siblings, and starts a war. The Titanomachy. This is the part of the story everyone knows. Zeus versus Cronus. Lightning bolts versus brute strength. But here is the thing most movies and books gloss over. The war was a stalemate. It lasted for 10 years. 10 years of constant, earth-shattering combat. And I don't mean armies marching combat, I mean gods throwing mountains at each other. The landscape of the earth was being pulverized, but neither side could win. The Titans were incredibly tough and entrenched on Mount Othrys. The Olympians were agile and powerful on Mount Olympus, but they were evenly matched. Zeus was frustrated. He was throwing everything he had, his lightning, his anger, his siblings, and it wasn't enough. The Titans just wouldn't stay down. Then Gaia, the grandmother of everyone involved, comes to Zeus with a secret. She tells him, "You cannot win this war alone, but there are 3 who can win it for you. They are bound in darkness. Free them and you take the throne." She meant the Hecatoncheires. Now put yourself in Zeus's sandals. You've heard the stories of these uncles. You know they were so terrifying that even the sky and the king of Titans locked them away. Releasing them is the nuclear option. If you let them out and they decide they don't like you either, it's game over. You're done. But Zeus is desperate. So he takes a team. He goes down. Past the ghosts, past the rivers of woe and fire, down into the crushing pressure of Tartarus. He finds the guards, the dragon Camp in some myths, and kills her. And then he sees them. Imagine seeing Briareus for the first time. The sheer scale of him in the gloom, the 100 hands twitching, the 50 faces turning to look at you. Zeus doesn't just break the chains. He's smart. He's a politician. He brings them food, nectar and ambrosia, the food of the gods. This restores their strength, but it also does something else. It creates a bond. It's a peace offering. He treats them like allies, not monsters. Zeus gives a speech. He says, "Listen, bright children of earth and sky. You've been down here a long time. You know who put you here. It wasn't me. It was Cronus. Help me take him down and you get your revenge." And Cottus, one of the brothers, speaks up. And this is rare because monsters in Greek myth usually just roar. But Cottus speaks. He says, "Divine One, we know what has happened. We know you freed us. Our minds are bent on war. We will tear the Titans apart for you." This is the turning point. This is the moment the balance of power shifts forever. They march out of the underworld. Can you imagine the scene? The Olympians are exhausted, they're battered, they're holding the line on Mount Olympus, looking across the valley at the Titans thinking, "We can't do this another year." And then, from the depths, 3 shadows rise up that blot out the sun. The battle that follows is the single most violent event in Greek mythology. It makes the Trojan War look like a bar fight. The Hecatoncheires didn't need weapons, they were the weapons. Hesiod, the ancient poet who wrote this all down, gets very specific about their combat style. He says they ripped massive rocks right out of the earth, not pebbles, boulders, cliffs. Because they each had 100 hands, they could throw 300 rocks at the same time. Think about the physics of that. A modern machine gun fires rapidly, but it's one bullet after another. This was a wall of stone. 300 massive projectiles launched simultaneously, with the strength of a god behind each one. And then, a split second later, another 300, and another. It was a bombardment. It was an artillery barrage before artillery was invented. The Titans on Mount Othrys didn't know what hit them. They were looking for lightning bolts. Instead, they got an entire mountain range thrown at their faces. The text says the Hecatoncheires overshadowed the Titans with their missiles. They literally buried them. The sky groaned, the earth crashed, the ocean roared. The vibration of their stomping feet reached down to Tartarus itself. This is the part that blows my mind. The Titans, who are immortal, tough, godlike beings, broke. Their morale shattered. You can't fight an enemy that has 300 arms punching you at once. You can't fight a living landslide. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was a massacre. The Hecatoncheires overwhelmed them, bound them in chains they probably forged themselves or just tied with their endless hands, and dragged them down. And here is the irony, the ultimate irony of the Hecatoncheires' life. They were born prisoners. They were hated for being monsters. They spent eons in the dark. And after they saved Zeus, after they won the war that no one else could win, they went back to the dark. But this time, they weren't prisoners. They were the Wardens. Zeus banished the defeated Titans to Tartarus, and he appointed the Hecatoncheires to stand guard over them. They live there now, in the deepest gloom, making sure Cronus and his crew never escape. They became the jailers of the very hell they were born in. It's kind of tragic, isn't it? They are too big for the world above. They don't fit in the palaces of Olympus. They don't fit in the forests of Earth. They only fit in the void. They are essential to the order of the cosmos, but they can never be part of it. But there is one story, a rare one, that shows they weren't just mindless brutes or eternal jailers. There was a moment, years later, when they came back. There was a coup on Olympus. Hera, Poseidon, and Athena, Zeus's own family, decided they were tired of his rule. They managed to surprise him and chain him up. Zeus, the king of gods, was helpless. Thetis, the sea nymph, who would later be Achilles' mom, knew that if Zeus fell, chaos would return. So she rushed to the underworld and called for help. She didn't call Ares, she didn't call Apollo, she called Briareus. Just the sight of him was enough. Briareus came up to Olympus and simply sat next to Zeus. He didn't attack anyone, he didn't throw rocks, he just sat there. He flexed his 100 arms. He looked at the other gods with his 50 faces. And Hera, Poseidon, and Athena? They froze. They looked at this monstrosity, remembered what he did to the Titans, and said, "Nope, not worth it." They let Zeus go without a fight. That is power. True power isn't just about throwing lightning. It's about being so terrifying that your enemies surrender just because you walked into the room. So why don't we see them more in movies? Why aren't they in every video game? I think it's because they are almost impossible to visualize. A guy with 100 hands? It looks goofy if you do it wrong. It looks like a glitch in a video game. It's hard to make that look scary rather than ridiculous. But the Greeks didn't have CGI. They had imagination. And in their imagination, the Hecatoncheires represented something very specific. They represented the forces of nature that are too big to comprehend. Earthquakes, tsunamis, avalanches. The kind of power that has no face, or 50 faces, and no mercy. When you stand at the bottom of a cliff and look up, you feel small. When you're in the middle of a hurricane, you feel helpless. That feeling? That is the Hecatoncheires. They are the reminders that before the beautiful human-looking gods took over, the universe was a place of monsters. And those monsters didn't die. They didn't vanish. They are just waiting, down in the dark, keeping the old world in chains so the new world can exist. So the next time you see a statue of a Greek god, perfect marble, human proportions, looking noble, remember what's underneath them. Remember that their throne is built on a foundation of 300 hands, holding the door to hell shut. And ask yourself, if that door ever opens, who is going to stop them this time? That's a terrifying thought, right? But it makes you wonder about the other monsters that might be misunderstood. We always hear the hero's side of the story, but what about the beast side? I want to know what you think. If you were Zeus, would you have trusted them? Or would you have been too scared to let them out of the pit? Let me know in the comments below because honestly, I think Zeus took the biggest gamble in history, and I'm not sure I would have had the guts to do it. Or maybe I'm just saying that because I don't have 50 heads to help me think it through. Anyway, thanks for hanging out in the deep end of mythology with me today. It gets pretty dark down here, but that's where all the best stories are. Catch you in the next one.